Hello and welcome to Hayes Reviews. Tonight we are going to be reading Chapter 5 from The Romance of the Rothschilds by Ignatius Balla, this 1913 book, 110 years old. We have been working through it one chapter at a time and learning some fascinating things about the Rothschilds, the great financial dynasty who came from nowhere, from nothing, and ended up becoming some of the richest, most influential, and wealthiest people in the world. Hello there. Good evening. Good to see you. Hopefully you are hearing me loud and clear. If you are, please thumbs up or a comment or something like that. That would be lovely. But I've clicked all the buttons that I usually click that usually work for me. So I think we can assume safely that the broadcast is coming out and you can hear me loud and clear. So I'm going to assume that and proceed with tonight's reading. So this is we've been learning a lot from this book, I think, and it's an incredible artifact and a window into incredibly powerful family who are very influential but don't get talked about very often in the mainstream. And to give you an idea about how influential this family is, many videos that talk about them are deemed worthy of a context banner underneath the video. I'm surprised that my videos haven't been given these context banners just yet. So I did a live stream earlier today. It was all about the climate change narrative, and that had a context banner on the bottom of it immediately after I finished streaming. So I'm surprised that these videos haven't been given any context banners yet, but. Rothschilds, as far as I'm aware, the only family that get context banners on YouTube. I don't think there's any others. So that gives you an idea about how important they are and how important it is to the predatory parasite class that you think the correct things about this family. And so we've been going through this book, which I can show you here. Switch over to the book cam. It's a really nice artifact. This particular copy is beaten and bashed up and kind of all mashed and bent, and it's not in great condition, but it's cool. It's a really one of my favorite books in my collection. It's a nice artifact to have, and I'm glad I managed to grab a copy because some of the copies of this go for they're pricey. Let's just put it that way. But you can get cheaper copies if you persist and keep your eye open and get lucky as well, right? Okay, so we got a Humanity Lane in the chat saying, hello, just got caught up today whilst out walking and doing jobs around the house. Great. That's the best time to listen to educational content, right? Out walking in nature, doing other jobs. It's a good time to put the headphones in and get learnified, as we like to say. So we'll have a bit of light on this. And I've found this book very, very revealing in some ways, but in other ways, I'm pretty sure a hell of a lot has been left out. And the overall purpose of this book seems to me to be a kind of whitewashing. Isn't this family wonderful? Aren't they so innovative with their business practices and so noble and hardworking and intuitive? And it's drumming up almost this mystique around them, painting them as philanthropic and charitable. But also giving us some insights into and hints at the role they played without being explicit. There's kind of hints at things like insider trading, things like having an overwhelming influence upon governments and members of royal families. For example, the last chapter we read was all about James Rothschild in France, and he became the second richest man in the country, second only to the king. And he managed to do that in 25 years. So that is some pretty impressive moving and shaking. So let's get into the reading and see what we're going to learn about tonight. What has the chapter got in store for us? Okay, so this is chapter 5. This is the Rothschilds at Naples. And we'll just adjust the lighting and zoom in there. And so the way I've been doing this is to encourage people, any thoughts or comments or questions or revelations or insights, please pop them in the chat, as I will be ignoring the chat as I read through the chapter. But then I'll have a review at the end and have a look at your comments and catch up and see what people have learned and see what they think about the reading. So let's get into it. Chapter 5, The Rothschilds at Naples. No city in the world has been so generously enriched with natural beauty, with all the marvels of earthly splendor, as the Napoli la Bella of the Italians. Before it lies the unending, velvet-like blue sea, breaking the rays of the sun into millions of sparkling gold coins with the ceaseless ruffle of its waves. Behind it is the great fire-breathing volcano, rearing its smoke-crowned head and at times pouring streams of devastating gold which spread like serpents of destruction over the country from its awful jaws. There, at the foot of Vesuvius, Pompeii and Herculaneum sleep their age-long sleep with all their petrified treasures, while the glorious blue of the island of Capri, with all its wonders, lights the distant horizon. Nor does this exhaust the marvels of Naples. All round it is a garland of laurel woods, of lemon and orange groves in bloom. The air is full of the intoxicating perfume of the flowers of Sorrento, Amalfi, and Posillipo, and the deep blue dome of the heavens gracefully arches the wonderful panorama. Nature has scattered the symbolic gold of her sunshine with prodigal hand over the city, gilding even the dilapidated huts of the poor, and she has been just as parsimonious in the scattering of the material gold that men covet and treasure. It was not, however, the beauty of Italy that moved the Rothschilds in the misty north to decide, in a council of the five brothers, that one of their number should go to conquer the country. They had calculated on paper, with the greatest care and thoroughness, what material results they might attain in a land so rich in treasure, yet divided into small states whose finances were in a worse condition than any others in Europe. They did not seek to realize some poetic dream, but they wanted a new field for the spread of their business, and, as they concluded that Italy was a promising country in this respect, they decided to create a centre there. The only question that remained was which of the five brothers should be sent on the expedition. Meyerramschell's eldest son, Anselm, had already entered upon his inheritance and assumed control of the Frankfurt house. Nathan had gone to London and won unbounded respect for the name of Rothschild in misty Albion. Solomon had introduced the work of the family into the imperial city on the Danube. Even the youngest of the brothers, James, had already settled in Paris and founded an independent establishment. The only one who had as yet no fixed residence and worked alternately at Frankfurt, Berlin, and Hamburg, was Karl, the fourth son of Meyerramschell, who was no more than an agent of the Frankfurt or the London house. He was now selected to carry the fame and power of the Rothschilds to the south. Karl Rothschild had hitherto been chiefly engaged, like his brothers, in floating the state loans which they undertook. He had not yet done any business on his own account, and had generally been engaged in Prussia as a plenipotentiary of the Frankfurt branch. At that time, financial operations of this nature were somewhat uncertain and had to be carried out with great care. The first large transaction with Prussia fell in the year 1816, when the country urgently needed a few millions to enable it to discharge its older debts. The Frankfurt branch of the Rothschilds, which had frequently made advances to the Prussian government out of the English subsidies in Napoleonic times, decided to find the required money. The loan was to amount to about £1 million, and Karl demanded a commission of 2% for the Frankfurt house. He had every confidence in his ability to carry the business through, as he believed that he could easily dispose of the bonds of the new loan in Holland. At that time, Karl was excessively anxious and prudent in money matters, as any careful businessman is when he embarks on large transactions for the first time. I think that's the first typo I've seen in this book. Should be when he embarks, I think. Though he regarded the loan as thoroughly sound, he did not wish to involve the capital of the Rothschilds themselves to the full extent of it, and he therefore sought to interest the Amsterdam money market in the operation. But the Dutch government needed this market entirely to cover its own financial claims and would not allow the loans of foreign states to be placed in their capital. Karl Rothschild then thought of the Prince of Hesse, who already held Prussian bonds for more than £143,000 in connection with an earlier loan, and, when Karl came to Cassel, he proved willing to undertake the loan. He did eventually find the money, and the fact was regarded with great satisfaction in Prussia, since it would prevent the issue of the new loan from depreciating the value of the older Prussian bonds. This was Karl's first large transaction. It showed that the youngest of the Rothschilds had his share of prudence and intelligence, even if it betrayed, at the same time, that his education had not been so good as it might have been. Karl was then 28 years old. Yet in the papers relating to the transaction, we find a letter written by him which swarms with mistakes in spelling. It contains such sentences as the following. Quote, "I beg you to have it ready as soon as possible. If it can't be done at once, must be postponed until mine or my brother, his arrival." And the footnote says, I have reproduced the errors as literally as possible in English. The elder brother of whom he speaks in this letter is Anselm, of Frankfurt, who wanted Karl, 15 years his junior, to make his first experiments in business under his care. He wished to teach him the 1,001 tricks of business life and initiate him to all the intrigues and stratagems which were required in negotiating state loans. It was a kind of apprenticeship, during which Karl was to learn thoroughly the trade of his father and brothers. When it was over, the brothers, always loyal to the wishes of the dead father, made Karl a journeyman in the profession and sent him to Italy to work independently. It was the year 1822 when the fourth son of Meyer Amschel established the Italian branch of the Rothschild firm at Naples. Money was very scarce in Italy at the time, in spite of all its treasures. The art of making gold had made more headway in every other part of the civilized world than in Italy, where the soil was so rich in superstition and all kinds of occult science. Mysterious alchemists still brooded over the flames in their secret chambers, and the stuffed salamander, to which the alchemists ascribed a supernatural power, hung over the furnace. The fluid seethed in the thick-bellied retorts and serpentine vessels, and the whalebone saws, the winding tubes, and the steaming pots all waited for the man-made gold to issue from the magical brew. The mysterious powder was extracted day by day from these vials in the secret laboratories of the alchemists, and by the light of ancient lamps, which hung on chains from the ceiling, the powder was committed to the crucibles on the furnaces. All the magic was fruitless, however, and the secret of the alchemist was not discovered in Italy. Then a quiet German Jew made his way down from the misty north and solved the problem. He made the coveted gold for the Italians. Genuine gold coins rolled from his hands, gold coins with the papal keys on them, and their genuineness was best attested by the fact that the Holy Father himself accepted and hoarded them, and he heaped honors on the smiling young Jew whose hands were ever full of these gold coins. Karl Rothschild's gold rang just as true in the Vatican as in the treasuries of the small Italian states, and they were very welcome as guests everywhere. At that time, Italy was, like Germany, an agglomeration of small states, but it was precisely this political division that represented Rothschild's capital and afforded him a splendid opportunity for business. When Karl chose Naples for his residence, he had no intention of confining his operations to the Kingdom of Naples, but intended to spread them over the whole of Italy. There was not a very brisk commercial life in Naples, but the beautiful city was the largest in the country, and there was a prospect of it becoming, with a little effort and skill on the part of the Rothschilds, the center from which they could extend their hands to any part of Italy. Karl did not intend to concern himself with the business life of Naples as such. He rarely entered into undertakings with private individuals. His idea was rather to use the enormous capital and excellent connections of the Rothschilds for the organization of state loans, as the other four Rothschilds had done so successfully in 4 other large European cities. Italy, the small states of which had perpetually to contend against scarcity of money in consequence of the bad financial policy they followed, seemed to be particularly suitable for such transactions. It was therefore quite natural that, very shortly after his settlement in Naples, Karl Rothschild became the almost absolute master of the various Italian exchanges, and the decisive factor in the province of state finance from the Alps to Naples. In attaining this position, he had a comparatively easy task. Quite apart from the work of their father, his brothers had already won a worldwide respect for the name of Rothschild, and the name alone sufficed to smooth his ways in the south. And in Italy, it was precisely the Rothschilds that were wanted, their excellent connections, their talent for organization, and their money. The state coffers were empty throughout Italy, and even the Vatican had to contend with an eternal lack of money. The finances of Rome had fallen into a lamentable position under the extravagant administration of Pius VI, and the value of securities had, in view of the lack of funds to cover them, fallen to an unprecedented depth, 5%. The Papal States could not contract any more loans even at usurious rates. The situation had not improved under Pius VII. Indeed, during his administration, the taxes on salt had been increased and the lottery introduced, as he had absolutely no other means to raise the money that he needed. It was all of no avail, and the economy of the state had to contend with ever-increasing difficulties. On January the 1st, 1821, the sum that had to be paid out annually on bonds in the Kingdom of Naples amounted to nearly 4 million Neapolitan ducats. It was therefore impossible to postpone any longer the reform of the finances, and on May the 26th, 1821, the King of Naples separated the financial affairs of Sicily from those of Naples and burdened Sicily with a loan of 4.5 million ducats, which Karl Rothschild found, and the interest on which was to be paid to the Paris house. This was Karl's debut on Italian soil. He had not yet opened a banking house at Naples, but had negotiated with the Neapolitan government as the plenipotentiary of his brothers. The loan which he concluded on very good terms brought to a head his determination to establish a banking house at the foot of Vesuvius. He then travelled over Italy in order, like a careful businessman, to collect information as to the financial situation in all parts in which he trusted to work in the future. His experiences and information must have satisfied him as he opened his bank at Naples in the following year. Immediately afterwards, the government turned to him for a loan, and, with the help of this, it extricated itself from its more pressing difficulties. Karl Rothschild was well informed as to the financial condition of Naples and knew that the kingdom had to contend constantly with money difficulties. He also knew, however, that the reason for this was not that the treasury could not meet current and extraordinary expenses. It was simply due to the fact that the old burdens were too oppressive on the one hand, and there were grave blunders in the fiscal administration on the country on the other. The amount of the loan was 16 million ducats, which Karl Rothschild paid into the coffers of the state. These 16 millions, however, by no means sufficed to put in perfect order the lamentable finances of the country. A new loan was needed, and the government again applied to the Neapolitan house of the Rothschilds. Karl now perceived for the first time the great influence he had in the kingdom. He had not yet been 2 years in the country, yet he wielded so great a power that his wish was taken as a command. And he now proposed to have his wish carried out. He was an intimate friend of the Cavaliere de' Medici, a distinguished Italian noble of fine taste and excellent qualities, who was not only a connoisseur in art, but a good financier. But the Neapolitan government had banished the Cavaliere for political reasons, and he was then living in exile at Florence. Rothschild did not forget his friend. It may be that he particularly felt the absence of his friend in Naples, where he was still virtually a stranger and needed social support. In any case, he made it a strict condition of his floating the new loan that the Cavaliere de' Medici should be recalled from banishment. He knew his friend's ability in the province of finance, and he not only wished to have him once more in his circle, but to attach him more closely to his person until he could find an opportunity to put him in a position which would be advantageous to the Cavalier himself and afford a certain security to Rothschild. The son of the Frankfurt ghetto had already, hardly a generation since old Meyer Amschel had sold his modest wares in Jew Street, attained such a power that he could dictate terms to the government of a country to which he had been a total stranger a few years before, and the government had no alternative but to obey. The second loan that Karl Rothschild, now Baron Karl Rothschild, negotiated for the Neapolitan treasury amounted to 20 million ducats. Yet these immense rolls of gold did not remain long in the impoverished coffers of the state. In less than a year, they were empty once more, and there was another appeal to Rothschild for assistance. Karl now attached fresh conditions to the loan. He openly declared that he had no confidence in the administration of the country's finances, and that he would not think of undertaking the new loan unless he was afforded a proportionate guarantee that the fiscal policy of the state would be entirely changed. He would, moreover, not be satisfied with a mere verbal promise to that effect. He demanded that the actual Minister of Finance should be relieved of his office and the Cavaliere de' Medici should be substituted for him. He felt that nothing but the cooperation of his friend could give him a satisfactory guarantee that the money matters of the kingdom would at length be established on a safe footing. This is literally the itchiest my nose has ever been. It's wild. The Kingdom of Naples accepted the condition. The Cavaliere de' Medici was made Minister of Finance within a year of his return from exile solely because Karl Rothschild pressed for the appointment. The third loan, which he then negotiated, amounted to about £2 million. But from that date, the Cavaliere de' Medici controlled the financial administration of Naples, and we may take it for granted that he did nothing that was unacceptable to Rothschild. In the meantime, Baron Rothschild had begun to regulate the financial condition of the other Italian states. Amongst other things, the Jewish financier liquidated a loan for the supreme head of Christendom, the Bishop of Rome. The papal government had in 1834, under the rule of Gregory XVI of the Capellari family, converted a 5% state loan into 3% bonds. This earlier 5% loan had originally been negotiated by the Rothschilds in conjunction with the Italian banking business of Torlonia for the Papal States. The papal treasurer, however, Cardinal Tosti, now wished to have the loan floated in Paris, apart from the Rothschilds, and he travelled to that city in order to enter into personal relations with the Parisian bankers without consulting the Rothschilds. No doubt he did this for sectarian reasons, but it is possible that the cardinal thought he would obtain better conditions if he put others in competition with the Rothschilds. At that time, the Parisian bankers were beginning to organize very vigorously for a common attack upon the Rothschilds, who had succeeded in excluding all other financiers from the business of floating state loans. This had not only led to a great deal of bitterness in French banking circles among what were known as the notabilities of finance, but it was felt as a great humiliation. Not one of them would have dared to resist the Rothschilds single-handed, but they hoped that a combined action would enable them to oust their opponents. The six leading banking houses at Paris, Hagemann, André et Cotier, Fould et Oppenheim, Blanc, Collier et Cie, Odier et Cie, and Wells et Cie, formed an alliance for the purpose of breaking the autocratic power of the Rothschilds. In arranging the first French loan to the Sardinian government, which they managed on the model of the City of Paris lottery, these allied bankers won a first small success. They snatched the business out of the hands of the Rothschilds and undertook it themselves. The lion's share of the work fell to Hagemann, who had formerly had a banking at Genoa and been regarded as one of the leading bankers in that city. During the time when he was in business at Genoa, Hagemann was intimate with the Sardinian minister Cassier and, through him, with the Parisian banking firm Cassier, to which the minister had first offered the loan. The Parisian Cassier, however, had too little influence to undertake the important business offered to him by his brother, but he succeeded in getting it placed in the hands of Hagemann and his associates. The Rothschilds, who had never up to the present entertained the idea that competition would be of any avail against them, now felt the defeat so much that they wanted to avenge it, and they swore to spoil the business of the Allies in future, or at least to hamper it in every way they could. They at once drew up their plan of campaign. They had sufficient means and connections to enable them to bring about artificially a considerable fall in the price of Parisian securities. This fall in Parisian stock brought about a fall in the rate of the Sardinian bonds, so that they quickly fell far below the price at which the associated Parisian bankers had accepted them. This conduct of the Rothschilds sufficed to inspire the bankers with prudence and induce them to abandon the idea of further struggle against the Rothschilds. When, however, they learned Cardinal Tosti's plan to convert the 5% loan into a 3%, André and Cottier insisted that it was an excellent opportunity for business and succeeded in inducing their associates to undertake it. They sent a confidential agent of the Allies to the papal treasurer at Rome for the purpose of discussing the details with him. They instructed their plenipotentiary to get the loan, if possible, at a rate of 70 francs. The agent of the bankers, however, had another and not less stringent instruction. He was to act throughout the negotiations as a simple intermediary and on no account to reveal the names of his principals. This he did. The negotiations were all conducted in the name of the Associated Bankers of Paris, but the names of the bankers were not mentioned. He promised to do so when the contract was concluded, and Cardinal Tosti was to be free to withdraw from the contract if he thought them unworthy of confidence. The plenipotentiary of the 6 bankers had proceeded so far with the negotiations that he considered the business to be as good as settled. They were approaching the final stage when, in spite of all their precautions, the Rothschilds learned of the matter. The mere presence of the Parisian agent in Rome, which was at once communicated to Baron Karl, seemed to him a suspicious circumstance, and, once his suspicions were aroused, he did not find it difficult to learn the facts. The Rothschilds had at that time influential friends in every government and every country, and they did not leave unrewarded the services of these friends. Karl at once went to Rome in order to make a personal inquiry into the situation. When he became fully acquainted with it, he visited Cardinal Tosti and showed him the original contract of the earlier 5% loan. The Rothschilds had undertaken this loan in conjunction with the Torlonia firm, and the contract signed in regard to it contained a condition which had hitherto been kept secret. It stipulated that the Holy See was not to approach any other firm about a new loan without first informing the Rothschilds and giving it the preference if it offered equally favourable conditions. The earlier loan had been arranged before Cardinal Tosti was put in charge of the papal treasury, and he was therefore unaware of the secret condition which Baron Karl brought to his notice. The intervention meant neither more nor less than that the Rothschild firm was going to use the veto which the contract granted it. The papal treasurer was now compelled to break off his negotiations with the agent of the Parisian bankers. It was a matter of course that, if the Rothschilds thought the business good enough, they would not let it pass out of their hands. On the other hand, it was possible for the Parisian bankers to make the loan not worth the acceptance of the Rothschilds by lowering their terms, and they declared that they were prepared to do so if a reasonable compromise were not effected. At that, the Rothschilds contented themselves with a moral victory, entered into friendly correspondence with the Parisian bankers, and came to an agreement to undertake the loan in cooperation with them. The Papal States and the Kingdom of Naples did other business with the Rothschilds besides contracting loans, and Baron Karl figured in the accounts of all the small Italian states. He advanced loans, for instance, to the Grand Duchies of Tuscany and Lucca several times. The total sum amounted to about £400,000. The then Kingdom of Sardinia, which had 5 million inhabitants and a national debt of around £16 million, had no less than 13 loans between 1848 and 1855, amounting in all to about £22 million, the yearly interest on which was more than £1 million sterling. 2 of these loans were negotiated by the Rothschilds, a loan of £3.2 million in the year 1850 and a loan of the nominal value of £2.68 million in 1853. As a recognition of the services which the Rothschilds rendered to the various Italian states, either in floating loans or making advances, the head of the Neapolitan firm received a number of decorations and other distinctions, even the Pope decorating his breast with the Order of the Redeemer. After the last revolution, Baron Karl felt that he had enough of life in Italy, and he returned with his family to his native city of Frankfurt. As long as he had lived in sunny Naples, his salon had been the chief centre of the best Neapolitan society, quite apart from the Rothschild millions. There was an attraction in Baroness Adalheim, Karl's wife. She was a daughter of the wealthy German family Hertz, an auntie of the well-known German poet Paul Heyse, and she was the soul of her husband's salon. A Neapolitan journalist writes as follows about her in the year 1850, quote, "If ever a woman was called to write the memoirs of her time, it is certainly the case with Baroness Adalheim, who has had the good fortune of observing the most distinguished men in Europe in her house during a quarter of a century. She knows every one of the men who are making history. One may doubt, however, if her esteem of men has been much increased during that period. The gifted lady was more than once compelled to suppress an ironical smile when the highest dignitaries, who even thought that they were greater than they really were, bent respectfully before her and were most assiduous in making her the most graceful compliments and saying pretty things to her, without openly confessing the power of money, which was in reality the god to which they did homage. Would it be surprising if, in such circumstances, the mistress of the Rothschild house entertained a great contempt for the world? She was, in fact, only saved from this by her deep religious sentiment and the nobility of her nature." End quote. Baroness Adalheim owed her great reputation, for such she assuredly had, for the most part, to her devoted philanthropy. In her case, it was certainly not the love of display, but the sincere feeling of a noble heart that impelled her to acts of charity. As long as she lived at Naples, she was conspicuous for philanthropic conduct and deeply conscious of her religious duty to devote part of her means to the relief of the poor. She did not, moreover, forget the poor in her own distant country. Even while she lingered by the Azure Gulf, she used constantly to send alms for the poor in Frankfurt. Whenever she travelled to that city, she had hundreds of garments made by the various women's societies which devote themselves to the clothing of the poor at Frankfurt, Berlin, and Hamburg. She bought up whole shops and thus at one stroke promoted industry and helped the destitute. She never forgot Naples, and her charity extended to the whole of the surrounding country. There is still to be seen at Naples the Asilo Rothschild, a home for the protection of children and for foundlings, which Baroness Adalheim founded in 1846 at a cost of nearly £5,000. This was, moreover, not the only institution she founded. She was equally zealous to provide for infirm old men and widows, and many a poor family in Naples today still draws money from the interest of the fund which Baroness Adalheim devoted to the purpose half a century ago. The obituary notices of the Baroness speak of her as a woman of a type that is dying out. In her mind, ideas of feminine emancipation never displaced the womanly virtues, even when she was misunderstood at times and her gifts abused. She had a remarkable gift of bringing relief to the distressed by her inimitable amiability, of making her gifts acceptable, and of inspiring courage and confidence in the dispirited. She never waited for the sufferer to come to her, but she herself sought out the poor, in the hovel no less than in the homes of impoverished gentlefolk. She had a kindly, penetrating eye for the poverty that hid itself from the world under a cloak of seeming prosperity. It was these people whom she chiefly loved to assist. The Baroness was at the same time a protectress of art, of science, and of genius. She had a passion for all that was noble, beautiful, and exalted, wherever it was found. It was, says the Neapolitan writer, as if all the graces hovered about her wherever she was. With all her gifts of heart and character, she was at times very witty and brilliant. She had a real enthusiasm for art, and a wonderfully clear and critical judgment of everything connected with it. Well educated and intelligent as she was, she never forgot her Jewish origin and was never, in any part of Catholic Italy, exposed to any unpleasantness on that account. Although the Jews were very much oppressed in the country at the time, even cardinals ignored her nationality. She not only supported her co-religionists, but often took their side in some controversy. Once, for instance, she obtained an audience from Pius IX and expressed herself fearlessly to the Pope in regard to the persecution which Cardinal della Genga and other powerful cardinals inflicted on the poor inmates of the Roman ghetto. The little Jewess bitterly reproached the successor of Peter in the handsome chambers of the Vatican and declared that such barbarism was a disgrace to the 19th century and that he, the Pope, ought not to allow it, since he must know from his own experience how painful it is to see one's co-religionists persecuted. If it pained the Pope to see the faithful oppressed in Ireland, it was no less painful to her to see the Jews ill-treated at Rome. Baroness Adalheim died in the year 1853 at the age of 53. She was buried in her own soil at Frankfurt, and 2 years afterwards, Baron Karl, who was in his 68th year, followed her to the grave. He also was buried at Frankfurt, where husband and wife sleep together in the Jewish cemetery under the simple monument of Carrara marble, which bears the words, "Sleep, Baroness Adalheim and Baron Karl Rothschild." 4 children, a daughter and 3 sons, survived the parents. The daughter, Charlotte, married Lionel Rothschild of London, and the brothers also chose their spouses within the family. Meyer Karl, the eldest, married his sister-in-law, Louisa, the sister of Baron Lionel. His brother, Adolf Karl, married a daughter of the Vienna family, Julia, the granddaughter of Baron Solomon. The youngest son, Wilhelm Karl, married Julia's sister, Matilda. After the death of their parents, all the 3 sons moved to Frankfurt, as none of them regarded Italy as a favourable field for the great financial operations of their house. Their father had ceased to do business in Naples some months before he died, and they concluded that it would be better to abandon it. When they reached Frankfurt, Baron Anselm, the eldest son of Meyer Amschel, was an infirm and failing old man. 82 years of toil and strain weighed heavily on him, and he merely awaited the hour when he could transfer the burden to younger shoulders. It had now come. He had no children, and therefore relied on his nephews. The eldest of them, Baron Meyer Karl, was 35 years old and was put at the head of the Frankfurt branch, which old Meyer Amschel himself had once controlled. He now took the place of the grandfather and filled it very ably. He had such a fine talent for business and was so reliable and firm that the aged Baron Anselm was quite content to leave the reins to him and retire. The Neapolitan branch of the firm was thus blended with the Frankfurt branch, and the title Neapolitan disappeared. The further history of the Neapolitan Rothschilds is to be read in the ledgers of the Frankfurt house. This Neapolitan activity of the Rothschilds had been made no more than an episode. Like the ancient Norsemen, they had descended for the conquest of Italy and had soon become tired of their acquisition. The geographical situation, the difficulty and slowness of communication from Naples prevented them from maintaining the close connection with the other branches of the house which it was an essential part of their financial policy to maintain. The Apennines and the Alps separated them from Paris, London, Vienna, and Frankfurt, and as there was at that time no telegraph to distant regions in communication, they felt that they were too isolated. Couriers and pigeons could do little to lessen the inconvenience of the distance. That is the sole reason for the Rothschilds abandoning Naples. Had the telegraph been invented a few years earlier, it is possible that the Neapolitan branch would have become one of the strongest of the 5. As it was, they quitted the shores of the beautiful bay, and they now only return occasionally for a few weeks' rest, as other travellers do, to the city where their father had been powerful enough to convert an exile into an important minister. That is chapter 5 of the Romance of the Rothschilds. Well, pretty interesting stuff. How about Baroness Adalheim going and giving the Pope a good telling off? It reminds me of that famous picture of a Rothschild. Isn't he like poking the chest of King Charles former Prince Charles, and kind of poking him in the chest like, you do as I tell you to do and don't complain about it and be grateful that I'm letting you wear this crown. You know, there's a picture out there of that. This story reminds me of that. You can imagine her going and telling the Pope, putting him in his place, making sure he understands who's really boss and who is king. As this book keeps telling us, this is a time where money is God, and people worship money. And this is why the Rothschilds became so powerful. Now, I cannot believe how itchy my nose got. It was both nostrils. Usually it's just one nostril, and it was going for both there. So that was crazy. It's like a spider sense when we're on the scent of truth, but a useless spider sense. When we're learning truth and we're finding truth, that makes my nose itch. Maybe it's something like that, because it always happens on the live streams. But that incident was fascinating. And then also the incident about the Medici family, because I know this family have a pretty significant role. I don't know that much about them, though, and I haven't actually got any books on the Medicis. And I wonder if this exile turned financier, turned minister of finance, is part of that family. And it's very interesting that Rothschild Carl had that power to get him back and bring him back into the fold after he'd been kicked out and exiled. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? To bring someone back from that brink. So pretty revealing stuff. Much shorter chapter than the other ones we've been going through, but fascinating and interesting nevertheless. Also interesting, this comment at the end about how if the telegraph had existed, they might still be there. So maybe this part of the world was kind of protected and saved from the wrath of the Rothschilds and the control of this family in some ways by just that timing and just the fact that telegraph wasn't around for them to communicate with each other in order to organize and coordinate their financial domination of that country. So let us now have a look over at the chat, and I'll see if anybody has popped in any comments or questions or insights or observations, if I can get this chat to load. Let us see. It just comes up with a blank window and says hide chat. Isn't that helpful? So what we'll do is we'll give up on that browser and we'll try browser number 2. And while that is just loading, I'll click accept and let's see. Okay, so we got a few comments. Adamski, hello, and Dr. Crispy Rothschild, hello, and Gwen Weston, hello. You guys have been my stalwart companions while I've been doing this series, so thank you so much for once again being here and checking out the work that I'm doing. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. A little simple and punchier and concise compared to the other longer ones. So we've got Humanity Lane saying, seems like Carl achieved the same as when Liz Truss and her chancellor were ousted. Yep. And we've got vast sums of money being loaned back then. Even in today's economy, it's more money than ordinary folks would get a mortgage for. Yeah, absolutely. Cyril's Way says, good evening to everyone. Good evening to you. And Jerry Tappan, hey, Nick, we're playing your live video in DIL, Do It Live. Oh, that is amazing. Hello to Jerry and everyone on the Do It Live podcast in Autonomy. If you are still tuned into my broadcast, I didn't even think when I scheduled this that I would be conflicting with the Do It Live podcast, but that is awesome. Jerry Tappan, you've got a video you put out today that I have yet to watch, but I'm looking forward to catching that a bit later. Jerry Tappan is a very dear friend from the Autonomy community, which if you're regular viewers to this channel, I'm sure you've heard me talk about before. There are affiliate links that you can explore to learn about this life-changing course. It's a 12-week course. It's a course of action. It's a community. It is just an incredible place to practice high-value skills, to learn about being an entrepreneur, to get that seed of an idea up and running and off the ground, that thing you've always been wanting to do that you haven't quite had the bravery or the courage or the know-how to do. Autonomy is the place to go and learn about how to do it in an environment that is supportive, that is loving, that is kind, that is nurturing, and that is just full of the most amazing people in the world. I wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you right now on this channel, reading this book, doing what I do if it wasn't for Richard Grove and his Autonomy community and course. So that is my little spiel about that course. I could go on and on and on and on, but I won't. I will save you that for now. But awesome, Jerry. Thank you very much for being here and leaving a comment and saying hello. That is really great and puts a big smile on my face, as you can see. And Adamski, caressing an itchy area with different material types can soothe it. Thank you for that tip. Yeah, I'll just have to like keep a pile of, different handkerchiefs next to me, maybe some silk ones, maybe some cotton ones, maybe some nylon ones. And then I can just kind of massage my nose and see if that eases the itch. Because it is strange. It's something I'm going to have to figure out. But, we do it live and we learn forward and we take these challenges as they come. So that is it, I think, for this chapter. Where are we going next in this fantastic book? The next one is chapter 6. It's going to be about the Frankfurt House. So we're back to where it all started. So remember, Meyer Amschel, the founder of the Rothschild house banking finances, he came out of Frankfurt. He was living in a little Jew ghetto, which was locked up at nighttime, and he exploded out of there, launched his sons into different financial centers in the world, and they went on to big things and scolding the Pope, loaning money to princes and kings, making or breaking governments and their ability to go to war, and also making or breaking the careers of exiles, such as the one mentioned here, the de Medici. What was he called again? Cavaliere di Medici. So the Medici family is something I got to learn about. If anybody knows any good books about that particular topic, please drop me a message and let me know. I can add them to my collection and I can read them out to you here and we can study and learn from them together. All right. I think that is it for today. We've only got 2 chapters left in this book. So pretty soon I'm going to be putting out a little, a poll in my Telegram group. That's where I get people to vote on what book they want to study and read through next. So if you're using Telegram, please join that in the comments below this video. There's a link there. You can get in there, and there I just share my I announce when I'm going to go live, and I ask some polls to get some kind of community interaction. And so you guys can have a bit of a steer on what we learn and what we explore together on the channel. And so you can do that there. You can also have a look at my Instagram. There's some, that's where I post different snippets of books and quotes and things like that I think are very useful to get on the record and preserve. Other than that, it is Saturday, and I hope you are all well wherever you are. And I hope the rest of your Saturday is relaxing and enjoyable. Rest of your weekend too. Hope you have a good time. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And with that, I'm going to end the broadcast. So good night and God bless.